The sky above Varanthos Prime burned orange and red. Princess Kelith Sirvain stood at the tall window of the royal palace and watched the fire rain down from space. The hollow swarm had finally arrived. For 300 years, the Varanthi Empire had ruled over 40 star systems. They had built cities that touched the clouds. They had created ships that could cross the galaxy in weeks. They had believed themselves untouchable. Now their greatest city was dying, and there was nothing anyone could do to stop it. Kelith was young for a Varanthi royal, barely past her 100th year. Her skin was pale blue, like all her people, and her eyes glowed soft silver in the dim light of the burning sky. She had been trained since birth to lead, to command, to inspire. But no training had prepared her for this moment. Her mother, Empress Yavara, grabbed her arm and pulled her away from the window. The older woman's face was calm, but Kelith could see the fear hiding behind her eyes. "You must go now," the Empress said. "The diplomatic vessel is waiting. Captain Neros will take you to safety." "I will not leave you," Kelith said. "I will not abandon our people." "You are not abandoning anyone. You are surviving. That is your duty now." The Empress pressed a small data crystal into her daughter's hand. "This contains the codes to our hidden treasury stations, the locations of our secret military bases, everything you will need to rebuild. Mother, please come with me. I will follow on the next transport. I must ensure the evacuation continues. The people need to see their Empress standing strong." Yavara touched her daughter's face gently. "You will be a great queen someday, Kelith. Greater than I ever was. But first, you must live." Guards escorted Kelith through the burning streets. The air smelled of smoke and fear. Varanthi citizens ran in every direction, screaming, crying, searching for family members. Above them, the hollow swarm's harvester ships descended through the atmosphere like dark clouds. They made no sound. That was the worst part. They killed in complete silence. The diplomatic vessel was small, designed for quick trips between friendly systems. It was never meant for escape. 12 crew members waited on board, along with one passenger Kelith did not recognize. He was shorter than the Varanthi, with brown skin and dark hair. "A human, Your Highness," Captain Neros said with a bow. "This is Danny Vance, an engineer from the Earth delegation. He was assigned to our ship as part of the cultural exchange program." Kelith barely looked at the human. She had more important concerns. "When do we leave?" "Immediately, Your Highness." The ship lifted off just as the first harvester reached the palace district. Kelith watched through the viewport as her home disappeared beneath waves of metal and darkness. She tried to reach her mother on the communication system, but there was only static. She tried to contact the Council of Seven, the advisors who were supposed to guide her. Nothing. She tried the military command. Silence. Within 6 hours, Varanthos Prime went dark. The planet that had been the heart of an empire for 3 centuries was gone. The ship drifted through space, hiding in a field of broken asteroids and debris. Captain Neros kept the engines cold to avoid detection. The hollow swarm's hunter probes were everywhere, searching for survivors. On the second day, the reactor began to leak radiation. Danny Vance was the one who noticed it first. He had been checking the engine systems when his scanner detected the breach. He ran to Captain Neros with the information. "We need to seal it immediately," Danny said. "If we do not, everyone on this ship will die within a week." "The repair requires someone to enter the reactor chamber," Captain Neros replied. "The radiation levels are already too high. Whoever goes in there will not survive. Then we need to be fast. I can do it. You are human. You will die. Maybe. But if nobody does anything, we all die for certain." Danny entered the reactor chamber with a basic repair kit and a radiation suit that was not designed for Varanthi technology. It did not fit properly. He worked for 4 hours, sealing cracks, replacing damaged components, and rerouting power systems. By the time he finished, he had absorbed enough radiation to make any Varanthi fatally ill. But Danny was not Varanthi. Humans, it turned out, were remarkably resistant to radiation. Not immune, but tough in ways that surprised the ship's medical officer. Danny spent 2 days in the medical bay, sick and weak, but alive. The same could not be said for the rest of the crew. The radiation had spread through the ship's ventilation system before Danny sealed the breach. Every Varanthi on board had been exposed. One by one, they began to fall ill. Captain Neros died on the 5th day, the medical officer on the 7th. By the end of the 2nd week, Keleth was the only Varanthi left alive. She had survived because her quarters were in the royal section of the ship, a shielded chamber designed to protect important passengers from exactly this kind of disaster. She had been safe while her people died around her. When Danny recovered enough to walk, he found the princess sitting alone in the observation deck. She stared out at the stars with empty eyes. She had not eaten in 2 days. "Your Highness," he said quietly, "I am sorry. I tried to save them." "You saved yourself," she said. Her voice was cold. "I saved us both, and I am going to keep us alive, if you will let me." Keleth finally looked at him. This small, strange creature from a planet her people had barely noticed. He was dirty and tired and still weak from radiation sickness. He had no right to stand in front of a Varanthi queen. He had no right to speak to her as an equal, but he was all she had left. "My mother is dead," she said. "My council is scattered. My empire is gone. I am queen of nothing." "Then we will find something," Danny said. "We will find other survivors. We will find a way to fight back. I am not very good at giving up." Keleth almost laughed. The idea was absurd. One human and one princess against a machine army that had destroyed 17 star systems. It was impossible, but Danny smiled at her, and there was something in that smile she did not understand. It was not hope exactly. It was something stranger, something stubborn. "Why do you think we can survive?" she asked. "Because humans always survive," he said. "It is kind of our thing." Keleth did not know what to say to that, so she said nothing. She simply stood up and followed the human to the engine room, where they began the long work of keeping their tiny ship alive in the silence of dead space. The days became weeks. Keleth learned to count time by the rhythm of the ship's failing systems. Every morning brought a new problem. Every night brought another repair. Danny worked constantly. He crawled through maintenance tunnels. He rewired broken circuits. He talked to the ship's computer like it was an old friend who needed encouragement. Sometimes, Keleth heard him singing strange songs in his human language while he worked. She did not understand the words, but the sound was oddly comforting. The food synthesizer broke on the 19th day. Danny spent 3 hours looking at the machine before he announced that he could not fix it. "The core processor is burned out," he said. "We do not have a replacement." "Then we will starve," Keleth said simply. "No, we will grow food instead." "Grow food? On a ship?" Danny smiled that strange smile again. "I used to work on a farm before I became an engineer. My father grew tomatoes and peppers. He taught me how plants work. He spent the next week building something he called a hydroponic bay. He used water recycling tubes, emergency lighting, and growing medium made from processed waste material." Keleth found the entire process disgusting at first. Her people had synthesized food for thousands of years. The idea of eating something that grew from dirt and water seemed primitive. But when Danny handed her the first small vegetable from his garden, a green thing he called a cucumber, she bit into it and tasted something she had never experienced before. It was fresh. It was real. It was alive in a way that synthesized food had never been. "How do you know these things?" she asked him. "What things?" "How to fix machines. How to grow food. How to survive when everything is broken." Danny shrugged. "Humans learn by breaking things. We make mistakes. We fail. Then we try again. We have been doing it for a very long time. Your species is young. You discovered space travel only 2 centuries ago. We have been surviving a lot longer than that. My ancestors lived through ice ages, plagues, floods, wars. There was a time when our whole species was reduced to maybe 10,000 people. Everyone else died. But those 10,000 kept going. They had children. Those children had children. And here I am." Keleth stared at him. The Varanti had never faced such challenges. Their world had been stable and peaceful for millennia before they reached the stars. They had grown powerful because nothing had ever tested them. "Perhaps that is why you fell," Danny said quietly, as if reading her thoughts. "You never learned how to lose, and humans have. Humans lose all the time. We just refuse to accept it." A month into their isolation, a scavenger ship detected their signal. It was a small vessel crewed by pirates who hunted the debris fields for valuable salvage. They saw the Varanti royal markings on Keleth's ship and decided that a princess would be worth a significant ransom. Danny saw them coming on the scanner 3 hours before they arrived. "We cannot outrun them," Keleth said. "Our engines are too damaged. We do not need to outrun them. We need to make them think we are not worth chasing." "How?" Danny spent the next 2 hours working on something he would not explain. When the scavenger ship came close enough to scan them, their instruments showed only a dead vessel with no life signs, no power, and no value. "What did you do?" Keleth asked after the pirates flew away. "I created a fake energy signature. Made the ship look like it had been stripped already. Also made it look like there might be radiation contamination. Nobody wants to board a radioactive wreck. That is not possible. Our technology does not allow for such deception." Danny laughed. "That is because your people never needed to lie to their machines. Humans have been tricking sensors and scanners since we invented them. We call it spoofing." Keleth began to understand something about humans that her teachers had never mentioned. They were not just primitive. They were creative in ways that her ancient civilization had forgotten how to be. They solved problems by thinking around them instead of through them. She asked Danny to teach her. They started with language. Keleth taught him proper Varanthi, not the simple trade dialect he had learned for his assignment. She taught him the formal words of the court, the subtle meanings hidden in tone and rhythm, the poetry that her people had developed over thousands of years. In return, Danny taught her to cook. He grew vegetables in their little garden. He showed her how to cut them, how to mix them, how to use heat and timing to create something delicious. He made something called pasta using processed grain and water. He created a sauce from tomatoes and herbs. He called the dish spaghetti. Keleth burned her first attempt, and her second. Danny did not laugh at her. He simply showed her again, patient and kind. "Why does this matter?" she asked him one evening. "We are running out of fuel. We are hiding from machines that want to kill us. Why are we cooking?" "Because we are still alive," Danny said. "And being alive means more than just breathing. It means eating good food. It means laughing sometimes. It means remembering that there are things worth surviving for." Keleth looked at the plate in front of her. It was not beautiful by Varanti standards. The sauce was too thick. The pasta was slightly overcooked. But she had made it herself, with her own hands, from plants she had helped grow. She took a bite. It was not perfect, but it was good. She laughed. The sound surprised her. She had not laughed since before the fall of Varantos. She had forgotten what it felt like. Danny smiled at her across the small table. See? That is what surviving means. Smith looked at this human who had somehow become the most important person in her life. He was strange and confusing and nothing like anyone she had ever known. But he was teaching her something her royal education had never included. He was teaching her how to be human, and maybe, she thought, that was exactly what she needed to learn. 3 months after the fall of Varantos, Danny picked up a signal. He was running a routine scan of nearby space when his instruments caught something faint. A transmission hidden inside background radiation. It was encrypted using old Varanti military codes, the kind that had not been used in decades. Someone is alive, he said, showing Keleth the data, and they want other survivors to find them. The signal contained coordinates for a location deep inside the Keth Nebula. The nebula was a cloud of gas and dust that stretched across several light years. It was dangerous to navigate and easy to hide in. A perfect place for refugees. It could be a trap, Keleth said. The hollow swarm might have captured our codes. It could be, but it could also be hope. They argued about it for 2 days. Keleth wanted to be careful. Danny wanted to take the risk. In the end, they decided to go. Staying hidden forever was not really living. It was just a slower way of dying. The journey to the Keth Nebula was long and dangerous. Hunter probes from the hollow swarm patrolled every major route. Their machines swept through space, looking for organic life signs to destroy. One wrong move would bring death down on them in minutes. Danny had an idea. We fly cold, he said. Minimum power. No engines unless absolutely necessary. We drift through the nebula like a piece of debris. That will take months instead of weeks, but we will be alive at the end. They shut down everything they could. The ship became cold and dark. They wore heavy blankets and ate cold food. Danny rigged a tiny heating unit in one corner of the living quarters. They spent most of their time there, pressed close together for warmth. In the darkness. They talked. Danny told Keleth about Earth. He described blue skies and green forests and oceans so vast you could not see the other side. He told her about his childhood on the farm, about his parents who worked hard and laughed easily, about his sister who wanted to be a doctor. Do you think they survived? Keleth asked. I do not know. Earth is far from here. Maybe the swarm has not reached them yet. Maybe they never will. You hope. Yes, hoping is free. Keleth told him about Varantos. She described the crystal towers of the capital city, the great libraries that contain knowledge from 1,000 civilizations, the gardens where her mother used to walk with her, teaching her about history and duty and the weight of a crown. I was not ready to be queen, she said quietly. I was supposed to have centuries more to prepare. My mother was supposed to guide me. Nobody is ever ready, Danny said. My father used to say that leadership is not about being prepared. It is about being present. You show up. You do your best. You let the people around you help you. I have no people around me. Only you. Then I will help you. Keleth reached out in the darkness and took his hand. It was a small thing, but in that moment, it meant everything. The journey through the nebula took 4 months. They rationed their food carefully. Danny grew what he could in the tiny garden, but it was not enough for full meals. They lost weight. They grew tired, but they did not give up. On the last day of the journey, they emerged from the nebula into a small pocket of clear space. And there it was. A station, hidden among the stars. Lights were on. Ships were docked. Life. When they landed, a Varanti officer met them at the airlock. She was tall and stern, with the markings of a fleet admiral on her uniform. I am Admiral Thishrakine, she said. You are Princess Keleth? Queen Keleth, Caliph corrected her. My mother is dead. The Admiral bowed her head. I am sorry for your loss, my queen. We have 200 survivors here. We have been waiting for someone to lead us. Caliph stepped onto the station and felt the eyes of her people on her. They looked thin and scared. They had lost everything, just like her. But they were alive. Then Admiral Kine noticed Danny. What is this? She asked, looking at him like he was an insect. This is Danny Vance. He saved my life. He kept me alive for 4 months. He's human. Yes, he is also the reason I am standing here. The Admiral clearly did not approve. Humans were newcomers to the galaxy. To the Varanthi, they were barely above primitive. Having one standing next to their queen was embarrassing. 2 weeks later, a hunter probe found the station dot. It came through a gap in the nebula's interference field. Its scanners swept the station, identifying life signs. It began transmitting a signal to call more machines. The station's defenses fired, but the probe was fast and heavily shielded. It dodged their weapons and kept transmitting. We need to destroy it before more arrive. Admiral Kine shouted. Danny was already running to a control terminal. I have an idea. If I can access the probe's communication frequency, I might be able to overload its processors. That is impossible. Our technology cannot interface with the swarm systems. Your technology cannot. But I am not using your technology. Danny pulled out a small device he had built during the journey through the nebula. It was ugly and rough, made from spare parts and desperate engineering. He connected it to the station's transmitter and began typing commands. What are you doing? Admiral Kine demanded. Creating a feedback loop. The probe sends a signal out. We send the same signal back, amplified. The probe's processors cannot handle the echo. They burn out. That will never work. It might. Danny pressed a button. For a terrible moment, nothing happened. Then the hunter probe stopped moving. Sparks flew from its outer shell. It drifted, dead in the empty space. Admiral Kine stared at Danny with new eyes. How did you know that would work? I did not know. I guessed. You guessed? Humans are good at guessing. We have had a lot of practice. The Admiral looked at Caliph. The young queen smiled. I told you he was useful, she said. From that moment on, Danny was no longer dismissed as a primitive curiosity. He was something far more valuable. He was proof that the old ways of thinking were not enough anymore. Survival required new ideas. And humans, it seemed, had plenty of those. Word spread quickly through the hidden channels of the galaxy. The Varanthi Queen had survived. There was hope. Ships began arriving at the station in the Keth Nebula. First came more Varanthi survivors. Soldiers and scientists and ordinary citizens who had escaped the destruction of their homeworld. They brought supplies and skills and desperate hope. Then came others. The Irithi were a reptilian species whose empire had fallen 6 months before Varanthos. They had been running ever since, hiding in asteroid belts and abandoned stations. When they heard about Callus Sanctuary, they came with 3 ships and 400 survivors. The Kel were insect-like beings who communicated through chemical signals. Their hive worlds had been destroyed years ago. They were among the first victims of the Hollow Swarm. Only a few thousand remained, scattered across the galaxy. Even the mysterious Void Singers sent representatives. They were beings of pure energy who lived in dimension-shifted fortresses. The swarm could not harm them directly, but it had destroyed the physical worlds they depended on for resources. They were slowly starving. Caliph found herself leading a gathering of the broken and the desperate. Different species who had never worked together before. Different languages, different cultures, different ways of seeing the universe. But they all shared one thing. They had all lost everything. She called a meeting of all the leaders. Admiral Kine represented the Varanthi military. A massive Irathi warrior named Krath spoke for his people. Pikal sent their eldest mother, a being so old she had seen the birth of stars. The Void Singers communicated through a translation device that turned their energy patterns into words. "We need a plan," Kellis said. "We cannot hide forever. The swarm will find us eventually. Then we fight," Admiral Kine said. "We gather our ships and strike at the enemy." "With what?" Krath asked. His voice rumbled like distant thunder. "We have 30 ships between us. The swarm has millions. They will crush us in minutes. Perhaps we should scatter," the Kel Mother suggested. "Hide in the dark spaces between stars. Wait for the swarm to pass." "The swarm does not pass," the Void Singer representative said. "It consumes. It expands. It will not stop until all organic life is gone." The leaders argued for hours. They proposed plans and shot them down. They debated strategies that had already failed. They blamed each other for mistakes made decades ago. Nothing was accomplished. Danny sat in the corner of the room, listening. He had not been invited to speak. He was just a human, after all. What could he know about galactic warfare? Finally, Kelith turned to him. "Danny, you have been quiet. What do you think?" The room went silent. The alien leaders stared at the small human who dared to be addressed by a queen. Danny stood up slowly. "I think you are all fighting the wrong war." "Explain," Admiral Kine demanded. "You keep talking about direct confrontation. Fleet against fleet. Army against army. That is exactly what the swarm expects. That is why it keeps winning. It has more ships, more machines, more resources than any of us. If we fight on those terms, we lose. Then what do you suggest? Surrender? No, I suggest we change the rules." Danny walked to the center of the room. "On my planet, there was once a small country called Vietnam. It was poor and weak. A much more powerful nation invaded it with the most advanced military in the world. By every measure, Vietnam should have lost. And did it?" Kelith asked. "No, Vietnam won. Because they refused to fight the way their enemy expected. They hid in jungles and tunnels. They attacked supply lines instead of armies. They struck quickly and disappeared before the enemy could respond. They made the war so painful and so expensive that eventually the invaders gave up and went home." Krath snorted. "We cannot make machines give up. They do not feel pain. No, but they follow logic. The swarm is efficient. It calculates cost and benefit. Right now, hunting us costs almost nothing because we do not fight back. But what if we made it expensive? What if every outpost they built got sabotaged? What if every supply line got disrupted? What if every victory cost them more than they gained?" "You are talking about guerrilla warfare," Admiral Kine said. "Hiding and running like cowards. I am talking about surviving long enough to win." The room erupted in argument. The Varanthi were offended by the suggestion that they should hide from an enemy. Their pride demanded open battle. The Earthi wanted blood and glory. Even the Kel seemed uncomfortable with such an indirect approach, but Kelith raised her hand and silence fell. "Our pride has already cost us everything," she said. "The Varanthi fought with honor, with glory, with overwhelming force, and we lost. Perhaps it is time to try something different." She looked at Danny. "Tell us more." Danny spent the next 3 hours outlining a strategy. Small teams striking isolated targets. Sabotage of construction nodes where the swarm built new machines. Corruption of communication relays with false data. Hit and run attacks that would slowly bleed the enemy dry. "This will not win the war tomorrow," he admitted. "It might not win the war for years, but it will keep us alive. And eventually, if we are lucky and smart and stubborn, we might find a weakness we can exploit. And if we do not find a weakness? Krath asked. Then we die fighting instead of dying hiding. At least this way, we hurt them back. The coalition voted that night. It was close, but the motion passed. They would fight Danny's way. Over the following months, the resistance began. Small strikes at first. A supply convoy destroyed here. A sensor network disabled there. Each victory was tiny. The swarm barely noticed, but the victories added up. Other survivors heard about the resistance. They came to join. More ships arrived. More soldiers volunteered. The coalition grew from hundreds to thousands to tens of thousands. And at the center of it all was a human engineer who had once fixed tractors on a farm in a country that most of the galaxy had never heard of. He became known as the architect, the one who designed the strategy that was slowly turning the tide. Keleth watched her coalition grow and felt something she had not felt since the fall of Varantos. She felt pride. Not the old Varanti pride of power and dominance. A new kind of pride. The pride of people working together against impossible odds. Do you think we can really win? She asked Danny one night. I do not know, he said honestly. But I know we can fight. And sometimes fighting is enough to change everything. Keleth nodded. It was not the certainty she had been raised to expect from leaders. But it was honest. And right now, honesty was worth more than empty promises. The war had truly begun. The war lasted 3 years. 3 years of running and hiding. 3 years of small victories and terrible losses. 3 years of watching friends die and cities burn. But the coalition survived. More than survived. It grew. The resistance spread across the galaxy like fire. Every destroyed outpost inspired 2 more attacks. Every successful sabotage brought new recruits. Species that had been enemies for centuries now fought side by side. The Hollow Swarm had created something it never intended. It had united organic life against a common enemy. Danny changed during those years. The young engineer who had fixed a reactor breach on a dying ship became something harder. He planned operations that cost lives. He sent people into danger knowing some would not return. The weight of command settled on his shoulders like a heavy coat he could never take off. But he never stopped smiling. Even on the worst days, when reports came in of failed missions and dead friends, he found reasons to hope. That stubborn human optimism that Keleth had first seen on their tiny ship still burned inside him. She had changed too. The frightened princess who had hidden in a shielded room while her world died was gone. In her place stood a queen who commanded fleets and inspired millions. She spoke to her people with a voice that carried across the stars. She reminded them why they fought, why they could not give up. Together, they became legends. The turning point came when a captured swarm probe revealed something unexpected. The machines were not truly independent. They all connected to a central processing nexus, a massive structure hidden deep in the core of a dead star system. It was the brain of the Hollow Swarm. Destroy it, and the entire network would collapse. It is too heavily defended, Admiral Kyne said when she saw the data. We could throw everything we have at it and not even scratch the surface. Then we do not throw everything at it, Danny said. We sneak something in. He had been working on a weapon for months. A logic virus designed by engineers from 6 different species. It would spread through the swarm's communication network and turn the machines against each other. But it needed to be delivered directly to the central nexus. No remote transmission would work. Someone had to carry it there. It is a suicide mission, Krath said. Whoever goes will not come back. Maybe, Danny said. Or maybe we find a way. We are good at finding ways. The attack on the central nexus became known as Operation Silent Dawn. 100 ships flew toward the dead star system. 90 of them were decoys designed to draw the swarm's defenders away from the main approach. 10 carried the strike teams. Calith insisted on leading the mission herself. No argument could change her mind. "My people need to see their queen fight," she said, "not hide in safety while others die for her." Danny stood beside her on the bridge of the lead strike ship. He wore a flight suit that did not quite fit his human frame. He carried a data device containing the virus. "Are you scared?" she asked him. "Terrified. You?" "The same." "Good. Fear keeps us sharp." The battle was chaos. Ships exploded around them. Machines swarmed like angry insects. The decoy fleet was destroyed within the first hour. But they had done their job. A gap opened in the defenses, just long enough for the strike teams to slip through. They landed on the surface of the Nexus structure. It was vast, larger than a moon, covered in processing towers and transmission arrays. The heart of the enemy. The strike teams fought their way through corridors filled with security drones. Calith fired a weapon until the power cell died, then picked up another from a fallen comrade. Danny ran beside her, protecting the virus device with his body. They lost half their people before reaching the central core. The core was a chamber of light and sound. Millions of data streams flowed through it, connecting every machine in the swarm. At the center sat a processing pillar, the oldest part of the Nexus, the original seed from which the entire network had grown. "This is it," Danny said. "I need to connect the device directly to the pillar." Security drones poured into the chamber. The remaining strike team members formed a defensive circle, firing at everything that moved. But there were too many. Danny ran for the pillar. A drone struck him from behind, slicing across his shoulder. He stumbled but kept moving. Another hit caught his leg. He fell, crawled, dragged himself forward. Calith saw him struggling. She broke from the defensive line and ran to his side. Together, they covered the last distance. Together, they reached the pillar. Danny pressed the device against the processing interface. "I need 30 seconds to upload." 30 seconds felt like 30 years. Drones surrounded them. Calith stood over Danny, firing at anything that came close. Her weapon ran dry. She picked up a metal rod and swung it like a club. "Done!" Danny shouted. The effect was immediate. The drones froze. Then they turned on each other. The chamber became a whirlwind of metal tearing at metal. The virus was spreading. Calith grabbed Danny and dragged him toward the exit. Behind them, the central nexus began to tear itself apart. They barely made it back to the ship. The pilot launched without waiting for systems to fully boot. They escaped the exploding structure by seconds. From a safe distance, Calith watched the nexus die. Across the galaxy, the hollow swarm was destroying itself. The silence that had followed its conquests was replaced by a new silence. The silence of a threat finally ended. Danny sat beside her, bleeding from a dozen wounds. Medical officers worked to stabilize him. But he was smiling. "We did it," he said. "We actually did it." "You did it," Calith said. "You saved us all. We did it together. All of us. Humans and Varanthi and Irithi and Kel and everyone else. That is how we won. Not because of any one species. Because we fought together." Calith took his hand. She remembered sitting in darkness on a cold ship, holding his hand while they drifted through a nebula. So much had changed since then. But some things remained constant. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we rebuild. We make something new. Something better." The coalition would eventually become the foundation of sentient species. A government that united dozens of worlds under principles of cooperation and mutual aid. Calith became its first leader. Danny became her chief advisor and, eventually, something more. Years later, historians would study the great victory against the Hollow Swarm. They would analyze the tactics and strategies. They would debate which species contributed most, but they would always return to the same conclusion. The war was won because a single human refused to give up. Because he taught a frightened princess that survival was not about power or technology or ancient wisdom. It was about stubbornness, about hope, about getting knocked down and standing up again. The Varanthi built monuments to Danny on every world they reclaimed. The inscription was always the same, a human saying he had taught Keleth during their darkest days. We do not go gentle, and they never did.